is an effective process. So on the topic of health and racial equity in particular, Gretchen Musicant and I have been talking about this a little bit more and how it may not show up in the slides as much as we hope, but that when we are facilitating our community dialogues and when we're facilitating discussions, particularly at the open house, it's really critical, and we understand this as planners, to help people see this interconnected elements of public health and racial equity. And what Gretchen said in particular is that a lot of people will talk about a common narrative. So if you ask them about health in their community, they'll talk about things that feel very comfortable. They'll mention health care. But you really need to facilitate that conversation a little bit more to get down to more of the personal level. And I think that's what we're doing in this phase of work. And so we started out the first phase of engagement and really raising awareness. And the equity component is particularly you can see that in who we're engaging and how we're engaging cultural communities and other communities who aren't normally at the table in this process. So we've been really raising awareness with people who might not know about the comp plan process and building capacity in order to participate. In this phase, it really is about values. It's about people's aspirations. It's about their personal stories. And we feel like it's very important for us to understand community values, personal values, before we talk about strategy. So we were very deliberate in our questions and how we phrase them. So we're not asking about strategy. What should the city do? We feel like we need to ask about people's personal values before we can start asking them about strategies. So a lot of the input that we're going to be getting to, hopefully over the next month, is going to be about those personal experiences and aspirations. And then we can analyze that and build that into the strategy that we come back to the community with in March. So we just feel like we can't really talk about strategy until we talk about community perceptions and values. So that's what our idea is with this phase. So Paul mentioned the community open houses we have next week, and the way I've been talking about this is that this is not your normal bureaucratic open house. This is not your normal boring community meeting. We are really trying to always do better. There's not an A+ success for this, but we're always trying to do better in our engagement process. So if we're going to have community meetings, we're going to try to design them in ways that are really inclusive, inviting, family-friendly. I'm going to bring my kid to one of these things. There's going to be ways for kids to interact. There's going to be food. We are using a lot of resources to help us make these different. Because frankly, one of our engagement staff people always says, if we can get people to these meetings and they say, that wasn't so bad, maybe I'll go back the next time I hear about something. That's our goal. And so, we want to aim higher than, that wasn't so bad. But, so we hired, Community Design Group, and many of you have heard this. They are, in a consulting group, a planning consultant group. One of their specialties is engaging particularly people who aren't normally invited into and participated in a civic process. So they've been helping us design these workshops. We also hired a social practice artist. Her job is really to help format the meeting so they're welcoming and inclusive and interactive. We also have a performance artist who's doing something very cool that I'll talk about a little bit. And so we have these workshops next week. And as Paul said, we are not designing them. So there's a presentation that people have to sit through and then go do things. It really is open house format. It is, you can go and you can do a quick interaction if that's what you want. You can avoid talking to anybody and just do your own kind of thing. You can sit down and have deep discussions. You can engage with artists. So we're hoping that it at least reaches our engagement goals of inclusiveness and meaningful and relevant dialogue and openness and empowering future leadership. So we really are hoping that they are successful, and we're pretty confident that they will be. So next Tuesday, obviously, is Global Market, 5 to 7:30. People can drop in whenever they want. We are actually using local vendors at Global Market for our food. And then Thursday is North Commons Park. Same format, same general staff. We will have a lot of our research team experts at these meetings as well. So we've been working with our communications staff in CPED to promote these meetings in ways that we've never promoted and communicated the work we're doing. and I think it's going really well. We have postcards that hopefully all of you saw in your boxes that I gave you. We also have 11 by 17 versions of this too. Those have been translated into 4 languages and distributed to a lot of cultural organizations through our consultant and through NCR's Access and Outreach team. You've been seeing information about engaging this process in News Bites, and I think you'll see that again this Friday. We did a couple of GovDelivery e-blasts to 10,000 people. We're doing a lot with social media and the city channels. We, through connections that we've gained in our community dialogues, we are using What's Up 612, which is more geared toward youth, to help advertise these events. We are obviously, Rose Lindsay in our office is going to be actually calling neighborhood and community organizations that work around these 2 meeting locations to say, hey, did you get an email? Do you know about this? We want to make sure that you hear about it. And we're doing a lot of other things. This photo is of me. It's from La Raza Radio. Councilmember Bender was on KMOJ on Monday. I heard that went really well. We were on La Raza Radio. Our consultant is from Peru and speaks Spanish, so he was there with me on Monday. Joy March Stevens and I were on Al McFarland's show on KFAI yesterday, and we're also working with Hmong stations and Somali radio shows to get the word out as well. So we're trying to do a lot of alternative media. We bought a lot of ads in alternative media as well. I have more details, but that's just an overview of some of the communications we've been doing. So here we get into the open house format. And a part of this is you just have to come to see it. So I hope to see all of you at at least one of these events. We will, if you want to be put to work, we'll put you to work. We hope to get your feedback on how it went afterward, because we always want to do better next time. So Paul mentioned we have these 4 topical stations. They will literally be stations that people can go interact on a topic they care about. They don't have to do everything. And we have this other area of the format at Open House that's going to be that vision for a healthy and equitable city. And we have our visual performance artist. His name is Eric Avery. He's doing something called TV 2040, which is almost like a TV show that he's hosting in the year 2040. And he's going to interview people as playing certain roles like the mayor in 2040. And we could pretend that you're a council member in 2040 if you're still on the council. And so we can do a lot of stuff like that. I think that's going to be really cool. We also have a couple of poets who are going to be there. They're going to be asking some of the questions that Paul talked to you about. You know, what is your ideal city in Minneapolis 2040? Some of these more visionary topics. And people talk to the poet about their perceptions and feelings on this question. And then the poet literally types a poem for them. And they will be able to go home with the poem, and we also get a copy of the poem. And so that's part of the documentation of the process as well. So that's going to be happening, and we also have a projection station where there's going to be a GoPro camera above a large table that's going to be a place for people to draw their ideas, and there's going to be artists there to help them work on that too. A couple other things we have. You can also do a quick tour through these things, and we will actually, as planners, give you a tour. So it really does feel welcoming, so you don't walk in there and be intimidated. So we will have greeters. We will be giving people quick tours if they want a tour of what's going on. The deep dive, and I think our artist is calling this Dig Deep. This is basically a community dialogue, a focused conversation within the actual meeting. 3 times during the night, one of our planners will be facilitating a deeper discussion on these questions and topics. So it's the way for people to have who really crave a more in-depth discussion with a number of people to feel like they have a venue for that. And the cool thing about this is that we're going to have artists that are called graphic note takers or scribes. They actually draw pictures and take written notes, and at the end of the meeting we will have a compilation, a infographic compilation of these notes. So we're trying to do these things in different ways, and then of course, like I said, food and family friendly. So again, we would really love to see you there and get your feedback so we can do it better and more inclusive next time. Besides these open houses, because as you know, these really are one way that we're doing our outreach and engagement, we're also hosting a number of community dialogues. And as you know, these are these are not publicly advertised events. These are led by leaders in cultural communities for their community. And we are entering into a conversation with them where they usually gather. And so we are working with the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors. We were at their meeting in late September, and they requested that we go to their housing committee in November. So we'll be doing that and having a more in-depth discussion on housing issues. We were at ALF, the African American Leadership Forum. Andrea Brennan from our housing director and Brian Shaver, who's co-leading the housing committee, and a number of us were there. And I think it was really helpful to have Brian and Andrea come and participate in one of these community dialogues. I think the topics that came up were really relevant. We are going to the Skyway Senior Center. We're going to be meeting with the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities, the Youth Congress, which is what I'm particularly excited about. And Councilmember Gordon hosted us at Youth Coordinating Board, thank you, meeting, and we got more advice on how to reach out to youth. We're going to go to the Wade House to work with members of the Latino community. And we're working with NCR staff to schedule a dialogue with the Southeast Asian community leaders as well as the East African leaders for the first week in November. So this is where particularly we could facilitate the conversations to show how health and equity are part of transportation, part of housing, part of jobs, part of all of those issues. And so we can do it better when we can be more personal and have a deeper discussion in particular. Of course, we're using technology. We have Tweet with a Planner tomorrow at noon. So if you are on Twitter, we'd love for you to help us promote that. And we're going to be talking about the questions that Paul talked about with you. And we are doing all the open house material online. And of course, I talked about our creative tools that we're using. So that's kind of the end of the material we have.
So, Ms. Elliott, we have a question from Councilmember Yang.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice President. Ms. Elliott, with regards to these populations such as the East African and Southeast Asian, I'm just wondering. I mean, let's say I'll just use the Southeast Asian piece. I mean, who are we actually meeting with? I mean, are they Hmong? Are they Lao? Are they Vietnamese? Are they Cambodian? Are they all of that? And I mean, are we meeting them once? Are we meeting each of those communities and, talking to their leaders, just because there's so much variety there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Madam Vice President, Councilmember Yang. Okay, I can answer all those questions. So we are intending for our community dialogues to be something that we do with the same groups during each phase of the process. So, for example, we had a community dialogue that NCR helped us host with leaders in the Southeast Asian community back in March before the Community Connections Conference. Before we kicked everything off, it was groups and leaders representing Vietnamese populations, Lao populations, and Hmong populations. So that we were all at one table. NCR has a lot of those connections and helped bring people to the table. We are working with NCR again, and we've specifically said we'd really love to have the same voices at the table this time, because we want to make sure that we are held accountable to them. And so when we go back to a lot of these populations during each phase, we'll say, this is what we heard from you last time. Here's the summary of that meeting. This is how your voice impacted decisions in this phase. This is what we want to talk to you about today. And this is how your voice is going to impact future decisions. And by the way, we'll see you again in April. And besides the community dialogues, our CDG, our consultant, is also doing some specific targeted outreach in a lot of with a lot of organizations representing our key audiences. And so they have been reaching out to HAMA and the Lao Assistance Center and others on the north side in particular to talk about how can we be helpful in getting people to the event at North Commons Park. So again, if there's other ways that we should be doing it, we'd love advice. But I think going back to the same people in particular is important so they can see us again and they recognize this is the process I'm part of and I can see my voice in it.
And Ms. Elliott, I mean, are there any assurances that any of these folks are actually from Minneapolis or actually live in Minneapolis? There's no one shortages of that, right?
Yeah. No, Madam Vice President, Councilmember Yang. Yeah, I think you and I talked about this when I met with you in May, and you raised this as a concern. And it kind of got me thinking about that as well. No, there are no assurances. And frankly, we want to make sure that the voices are being represented are Minneapolis voices. We know that a lot of people care about how planning and the built environment happens in Minneapolis, and they want to come to the table too. But if there are other organizations you think that we should be talking to, let me know, because what we can do is invite them into the community dialogue process. So we go back to the same organizations and we continue adding people into the fold.
Okay, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, and I really appreciate the effort that's going into this comp plan development to engage the community and have the dialogue. I think this is unprecedented, and so I really appreciate the work and the effort and the time that we're taking to do that and develop it and engage the community, and also the challenge we're taking on to try to incorporate all that into the plan. Yeah. I wanted to note that, of course, I'm on the City Council, and so I'm concerned about our engagement and the responsibility we have to approve this fabulous plan when it comes forward. And so it will be interesting. So there's lots of drivers and there's lots of interests. I'll just put it out that way. And there's also, I'm sure, lots of interest from residents and non-residents in Minneapolis is just so key and important to the state, and I'd say beyond that as well. I also was noticing when I looked at the timeline and when I was thinking about my work and what the council does and what's going to be happening next year in the city, at first kind of thinking about how, well, I hope the comp plan is founded and based on our values and goals. And obviously it is. I see health and equity right here. But every 4 years we do a strategic planning, and it's following an election. And so in 2017, anybody who wants to serve on the city council or be mayor or serve on the park board will be doing some intensive community engagement of their own. So I just want that to, I'm not sure how that can interface with any of this. Obviously, next year there's a development of the policy framework is in the timeline and all these important issues. But also to be aware then that following that election, there'll always be an internal process that we have with department heads and electeds to develop our strategic plan for the next 5 years and our goals and values. And I'm not anticipating that they'd come back dramatically different necessarily, but they could easily be informed by all the work that you're doing, but also all those campaigns that are happening over 2017. So somewhere maybe on the timeline and the framework, think about that and how do the strategic goals and values or whatever work gets done, how's that going to impact the comp plan? I mean, potentially if it's a dramatic change and there's new people, I mean, we equity and health are in the last strategic plan, but they've changed over time. We'll have to be nimble enough to mesh it all. And hopefully the final review and approval process, I don't know, you know how one council really likes, at least this is my third term. So I've seen how sometimes one council seems to have a consensus around a certain set, and then the new council comes in and they think, nope, this is now a new priority. And so let's just be aware of that. You don't even have to comment on any of that. I just wanted that out here for all of us to be aware of. And hopefully there'll be lots of discussion about the comp plan in 2017 as part of a campaign issue going on there and all the things that we could put in here, and it'll help raise the engagement too.
All right. And Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to jump in and respond to that, maybe rather than have staff do it, which was that I think everyone's very conscious of the timing of this process, and that's part of why the plan has been to bring so much of this through the council at each micro step of the process, maybe more than we would have even done otherwise, and that it really truly be a consensus building process that works with policymakers, but also directly with the community. And that's why we're starting with these big questions about people's day-to-day experiences, so that folks aren't sort of jumping right to a solution or an outcome that they may be advocating for, so that we're able to really do a stepwise process of hopefully building consensus, not just among policymakers who will be voting at the end, but also a really transparent process throughout. And we've been coming through committee every couple of months with different pieces of this, including the values that you referenced that built upon the values that this council had adopted at the beginning of our terms. So, and staff had met with every council member at least one time before. I know that they're very willing to continue to meet with council members one-on-one if folks have specific topic areas or interests to engage with. So that's, I think, being woven in, but I appreciate the highlighting.
It is, and I'm not necessarily worried. I wasn't trying to express some overt concern that we're missing something major or anything like that. I just wanted to be there about it, and I appreciate all the inclusion.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing further questions from council members, so I think I will just say first a big thank you to those who are leading this work, Beth Elliott, Paul Mogush, and Hyla Mays, but also a very large team that is engaged in making sure that information is gathered, that we have a good design to our engagement process, and really there is so much involved in the comprehensive plan update. I know that it is a very, very significant undertaking, very important to our future. So I want to say thank you to all of those staff who are involved. And I want to reiterate Ms. Elliott's request that council members look at their calendars and consider how they are able to personally participate, whether that be in the larger community gatherings or in some of the community dialogues that have been described, and because there seem like there are quite a few opportunities, and it would be very good to have the policymakers witnessing how is the process going and be able to help provide ongoing feedback on that. It sounds like you have really done a lot of work to think through how does engagement look, how might it look different to make sure this process is as successful as possible. So thank you very much. And with that, we are just receiving and filing this update. So I will ask for move to approve this item. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. And then finally, we have reports of committees. So first, we have the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee with Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilmember Fry chaired the meeting in the last cycle, so he'll be providing the report today and on Friday. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice President. On the CDRS agenda, we have 10 items that are going to be moved forward for this Friday. We've got a property assessed clean energy financing for 3800 Nicollet, a series of gambling licenses for St. Louis hockey boosters, which we will be amending. This was forwarded without recommendation. Number 3 is a liquor license application for Red Savoy Pizza. We have a series of liquor business and gambling license applications. That's for numbers 5 and 6 is a rental dwelling license condition and stipulated agreement. Items 7, 1, 2, and 3 are applications for environmental grant funding in the fall for 2016. Number 8 is amending our Fairview Health Services bonds. 9 is a 2015 emergency solution grant. And number 10 is an amendment to property assessed clean energy financing for Fortiva Investments. Happy to take any questions.
All right, I'm not seeing questions. Next, we have intergovernmental relations, and I have that report. There are just 2 items that were action items. The first is a response to the FERC notice of availability of draft environmental assessment for Crown Mill Hydroelectric Project, and the second was contract for federal representation services. I'm not seeing questions, so next we have public safety, civil rights, and emergency management.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We will have 8 items for approval. The first item is the Public Accommodations Anti-Discrimination Resolution. The second one is a travel expense donation acceptance. Third item is a travel expense donation acceptance. Fourth is the same. The fifth is a MOU with the Arts Institute International Minnesota. The sixth item is a grant acceptance. The seventh item is the contract to provide comprehensive emergency operations and exercise services with Foresight Consulting. And the eighth item is a MOU with ATF. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Yang. Next is Transportation and Public Works, and I'll just note, as I forgot to do so earlier, that the chair, Councilmember Reich, had to leave this meeting early to attend his appointment to the TAB as part of the Metropolitan Council, and Councilmember Palmisano, who is the vice chair of that committee, is attending a settlement conference on behalf of the city. Councilmember Reich did provide me with the meeting update, and I will just note that there are 16 items. These were all routine consent items that we did not have additional discussion in the committee. So I invite folks to take a look if they have interest in these routine department items. Ways and Means is our next committee with Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have 11 items on our agenda for Friday. First two are, one's a contract amendment with the state of Minnesota for court data services, and we have a joint powers agreement between the city and the state Department of Public Safety and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension just executes that contract. We have a grant acceptance from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and this is for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's Resiliency in Communities After Stress and Trauma program. It's a $1 million grant. There are 4 contracts and acceptance of low and responsive bids for various projects at the Convention Center and Target Center. We also have the 2016 property tax special assessment of delinquent utility charges. And then we're refunding general obligation tax increment bonds from Midtown Exchange and refunding the general obligation taxable Block E refunding bonds. This is going to save a significant amount of money for us in future debt payments. So those are items number 9 and 10. And the final item is a contract termination with Ardent Technologies. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Not seeing questions. Finally, we have Zoning and Planning with Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 7 items from Zoning and Planning. Denial of an appeal, some interim use permits in North Minneapolis, rezoning at 3454 33rd Avenue South, rezoning at 2444 Logan Avenue North, right-of-way vacation, snow storage, and a snow storage ordinance passage. I can answer any questions.
All right. And I am not seeing questions. So with that, I believe we have concluded the business before us, and we are adjourned. Thank you.